bop, bop, shoo bop. Let's go. Turn up the heat in the wasteland glow. Swing that bat, move those feet. This wasteland boogie's got a crazy beat. Out in the wasteland, the night's alive. With the rads and the ghouls, we'll survive. Grab your partner, don't be shy. Let's boogie till the stars light up the sky. Oh, boogie in the wasteland. Dance away your blues. Shake it up, swing it out. There's no time to lose. Boogie in the wasteland. Feel that crazy beat. Stomp your boots and clap your hands. Make it sweet. Traders are singing down in Megaton. The beat's so hot, it's a rad storm of fun. Even the death claws can't resist. They're swaying their tails in a radioactive twist.
War. War never changes. The tagline that would become iconic of a post-apocalyptic wasteland was the brainchild of Tim Kaine, as his passion project first released in 1997. Set in America, scarred by nuclear warfare, the video game franchise originally developed by Interplay Productions features everything from killer mutants, merciless raiders, crazed ghouls, and maniacal robots, all set to an atom punk backdrop. The end of the world is only the beginning in the universe of Fallout. The timeline of Fallout's world diverges from our reality shortly after the end of the Second World War, with the Soviet Union eventually becoming a fallen superpower and China becoming America's primary foe. Microchips and miniature electronics never materialize, leaving nuclear energy, vacuum tubes, and robotics to proliferate instead. Society seemed to collectively stagnate culturally, resulting in the music, family values, and visual aesthetic of the 1950s to remain even as the 21st century arrived. It was a largely idyllic and wholesome time as far as America was concerned. However, the transition from oil to nuclear fusion proved to be too slow, causing the world's fossil fuels to be completely depleted by 2052. Nations collapsed into conflict during the resource wars, accompanied by the disbanding of the UN and the annexation of Canada by the United States. This period would last for approximately 20 years. Among the most bitter combat was the Anchorage campaign in Alaska. In 2066, China faced an energy crisis as America seized the last operational oil pipeline on Earth. Launching an amphibious assault to seize the resource, General Jingwei's army quickly fortified the area and used Crimson Dragoon stealth infantry to ambush America's forces. The fighting quickly turned into a quagmire, with the United States struggling to provide logistical support after being caught off guard by an enemy that had superior cloaking technology. Desperate to break the stalemate, the Westech Corporation unveiled the first model of what would change the face of warfare forever in 2067, Power Armor. Outfitted with the T-45 and later T-51B models, American soldiers could withstand machine gun fire, endure freezing temperatures, and wield heavy weapons normally mounted on vehicles. The climax of the final push would come in January of 2077, with General Constantine Chase's forces assaulting General Jingwei's fortress, managing to disable the Chinese defense grid, a pulse field, before cornering and killing the commander. With Operation Anchorage a success, remaining Chinese forces either surrendered or retreated back across the Bering Strait. Several years before the Anchorage campaign, what became known as the New Plague struck. Its symptoms were devastating, including swollen lymph nodes, hemorrhaging, and organ failure. To contain the spread of the illness, the U.S. government implemented authoritarian policies, including quarantine camps, martial law, and suppression of the press. Although the outbreak was blamed on communist China as socialist extinction, the truth involved was American government engineering it as a bioweapon in secret labs. Vials containing the virus shattered when Chinese agents attempting to steal samples were intercepted, exposing it to the public. Work on developing a cure was contracted to the Westech Corporation under the Pan-Immunity Virome Project, PVP, in 2073. Seeking to alter the structure of human DNA, it was believed they could grant the population immunity to the new plague as well as other biological agents. By 2075, researchers noticed their creation was rewriting the genetic code of their subjects, resulting in increased muscle mass and bone density, as well as altered brain structure. Now dubbed the Forced Evolutionary Virus, FEV, the military took over the project in an attempt to create super soldiers. The ongoing struggle between America and China would not be confined to the Alaskan theater. By 2074, the frustrated Joint Chiefs of Staff authorized a counteroffensive invasion of the Chinese mainland centered around the Yangtze River. The combat here consisted of brutal urban attrition against fanatical defenders. Just as things on the home front were starting to destabilize into economic collapse and food riots, the arrival of power armor in 2076 allowed the American military to crush the opposition in Shanghai and Nanjing. Now driven out of Alaska and their domestic supply lines in shambles, China was helpless as the U.S. forces closed in on Beijing. Things would finally boil over on October 23, 2077, with the outbreak of the Great War. With their defeat inevitable, China instigated a sudden exchange of nuclear weapons in an apocalyptic event that reduced the landscape to ash. Over the course of 2 hours, civilization was destroyed, and millions of people were killed. Not all was lost, however, as some had foreseen the coming storm. Tasked by the government, a company named Vault-Tec had constructed 122 subterranean shelters known as vaults. Appealing to a population terrified of the new plague and the prospect of war, the ulterior motive behind the vaults was to experiment on civilians. These involved studying how different populations reacted to various sociological and psychological conditions. Some examples include Vault 11, where residents were told to sacrifice their elected overseer every year to survive. Vault 21, where disputes were decided by gambling. Vault 108, the Gary Vault, that produced an army of clones chanting their name. Vault 76, meant to contain the best and brightest individuals. Or Vault 111, where the residents were placed into cryogenic stasis. Outside the vaults, life still managed to endure in the wasteland that was once America. Various organizations and tribes emerged from the ruins of civilization as survivors banded together to face monsters, raiders, and other threats. Since these groups had various goals and interests, many would experience tension, if not outright conflict, as the centuries passed. Formed from the remnants of the corporate elite, government figures, and military brass, the Enclave emerged after securing their survival in offshore oil rigs and secret bunkers. Viewing themselves as the legitimate heirs of pre-war civilization, the Enclave viewed the population of the Wasteland as subhumans that must be exterminated before America could be rebuilt. To this end, their original leader, President Dick Richardson, ordered a weaponized strain of the FEV to be deployed, but was killed before his plan could be implemented when his oil rig was destroyed in 2242. With their leadership shattered, the surviving Enclave retreated to a bunker in Raven Rock, Maryland. It was here that they discovered a supercomputer that had gained sentience after processing centuries of Americana, such as baseball stats, folklore, and presidential speeches. Taking the name John Henry Eden, the AI declared itself president and took control. Enclave radio broadcast his voice across the capital wasteland, declaring the importance of rebuilding America and traditional values, with only the upper echelon of the Enclave being aware that President Eden was an AI. Unfortunately, the supercomputer had inherited their directive of genetic purification, and thus attempted to contaminate the area's water supply before being destroyed. After the Great War had settled, a team of deserters from the U.S. Army under the command of Captain Roger Maxson founded the Brotherhood of Steel. Blaming the apocalypse on the misuse of technology, they fanatically seek to monopolize and preserve it with the zeal of a religious knighthood. Rigidly structured, newcomers are known as initiates that undergo training and perform menial tasks before being promoted to a knight or scribe. Knights belong to the Order of the Sword, serving as pilots and mechanics as well as soldiers, after receiving their own power armor. Once a knight demonstrates impressive skill, or is appointed by the ruling council, they become an elite unit known as a paladin, joining the Order of the Shield, where they will be deployed on the most dangerous tactical missions. Scribes, on the other hand, will join the Order of the Scroll, where they become researchers and historians, wearing heavy robes instead of power armor since they do not serve a combat role. After gaining enough experience, scribes will become the senior or head scribes, where they lead research teams or other scholarly pursuits. The High Command of the Brotherhood of Steel contains 4 individuals. The Star Paladin, the most accomplished paladin in a given theater of war. The Sentinel, operating autonomously as they command battalions. The Elder, the supreme commander of a regional chapter that oversees judicial rulings, technological development, and military deployments. And finally, the High Elder, ruling from the Lost Hills bunker in California, where the doctrine of the Brotherhood is decided. Although known for their fierce loyalty, a schism developed between the organization's east and west branches after Elder Owain Lyons broke with tradition and used technology to protect civilians from mutants in Washington, D.C., as well as starting to recruit outsiders instead of relying on hereditary membership. Decades later, Elder Arthur Maxson took command of the Outcasts to reassert the Brotherhood's technological monopoly alongside their militaristic expansionism. In a world where might makes right, and seemingly everyone is out to carve out a seat of power for themselves, the followers of the Apocalypse took on a more humanitarian role. Founded after 2180 by a woman known only as Nicole, the followers believe that brutality is caused by ignorance, and thus strive to share knowledge, medical care, and historical preservation. The group was first formed after Nicole led a group of settlers into the ruins of Los Angeles, or the Boneyard, as it is now known. There, they occupied a public library and spent years learning as much as they could. Though her parents were killed by raiders when she was a child, Nicole and the followers adopted a policy of anarcho-pacifism, braving the poorest slums and tribal areas. Their altruistic nature has made them a target for raiders and tyrants. The overcrowded and diverse Vault 15 opened in 2097, releasing a population that would go on to form raider tribes such as the Great Khans, though a peaceful group led by Aradesh founded the humble village at Shady Sands. Persevering against the dangers they faced, the settlement allied with their neighbors while building infrastructure and trade routes, eventually forming the New California Republic in 2189. Aradesh's daughter, Tandy, would act as president of the NCR for 52 years, becoming known as the Great Mother of the largest civilization on the continent at 700,000 people. Additionally, they established a gold-backed currency to replace the bottle caps most Wastelanders used, as well as banning slavery, prostitution, and gambling. Now consisting of 5 states, Shady, Los Angeles, Maxson, Hub, and Dayglow, the NCR began to succumb to internal rot after Tandy's death, having become a swollen bureaucracy overtly manipulated by agricultural barons that pushed to expand their borders. Of the NCR's forces, it is the Rangers that have achieved legendary status. Recognizable by their riot armor and duster trench coats, the Rangers were originally private volunteer vigilantes that hunted slavers, having been merged with the NCR military via the Ranger Unification Treaty of 2271. Whereas the NCR was formed as a democratic republic, another rising power would seek to emulate the Roman Empire's use of brutality, slavery, and conquest. Ironically, it would be one of the followers of the Apocalypse that would found the reborn empire in 2247. An intellectual named Edward Sallow, he had been dispatched to the Grand Canyon to study tribal dialects with a linguist named Bill Calhoun, and a new Canaanite arms dealer named Joshua Graham. After being captured by a failing tribe of primitives called the Blackfoots, Sallow shared his knowledge of military tactics and weapons manufacturing to give them an advantage over their rivals. His influence caused the Blackfoots to declare Sallow a deity, where he took the name Kaiser, and declared Joshua his Malpais Legate, or first commander. For his part, Bill Calhoun was banished and returned to the followers to relay what had transpired. As the years passed, Kaiser's legion would assimilate 86 distinct tribes into their ranks through conquest. These tribes had their identities destroyed and languages banned, with children separated from their families and men conscripted into military service. Eschewing advanced technology as decadent, Legion soldiers typically wield spears, machetes, and firearms. Legionary recruits being given only basic equipment until they are promoted based on combat performance. Slavery forms the backbone of their workforce, with women used strictly for breeding, and often uses crucifixions, beheadings, or immolation to intimidate their opponents. In addition to their military might, Kaiser's Legion also has the Frumentari, a spy network used for espionage and assassination. On the East Coast, far from the centralized nations of the NCAR or Kaiser's Legion, are the Minutemen, a grassroots militia inspired by American Revolutionary War heroes of the past. They are not professional fighters, but rather farmers, scavengers, and traders that have sworn to protect the people at a minute's notice. Unconcerned with amassing technology, wealth, or territory, they will defend settlements from raiders or monsters upon being signaled. Their lack of structure proved to be their downfall, however, when in 2287 the town of Quincy was attacked by a mercenary group known as the Gunners. Despite pleading for reinforcements, the Minutemen were wiped out, leaving Preston Garvey as the sole survivor among a handful of refugees. With nuclear power having reshaped the world, it is no surprise that some would see it as a divine manifestation. The Children of Atom are a cult that views the Great War as a holy event, believing ionizing radiation as a force of creation. Their theology states that each atom contains an entire universe within it, meaning nuclear explosions release billions of them. As such, someone dying of radiation sickness is known as the Division, where their soul shatters to give rise to countless new worlds. Deemed insane by outsiders, the Children of Atom strive to live in radioactive zones, such as Megaton, a village built around an unexploded nuclear bomb, or the Glowing Sea, the irradiated area around Boston. Oddly, some members are immune to radiation due to a genetic mutation, seeing their ability to survive environments that would liquefy most humans as proof of a divine blessing. Located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the campus known as the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, or CIT, performed cutting-edge research for corporate and military applications before the war. When the bombs dropped in 2077, the students and professors retreated into advanced shelters under the campus, where they would be cut off from the outside world. With access to vast technologies and data, they became known simply as the Institute, relying on teleportation via the molecular relay to deploy their agents. By 2287, they were able to kidnap or assassinate various Wasteland citizens and replace them with a synth duplicate. Synths being artificial humans virtually indistinguishable from real ones. Specialized synth agents, known as coursers, exist to retrieve and reset any synths that attempt to escape, as well as neutralize designated targets. This insidious method of espionage, resource extraction, and destabilization by the Institute caused the surface communities to become rife with paranoia. The third generation of synths are indeed so human-like they have gathered a covert organization of sympathizers known as the Railroad. Once a synth seeks to escape, a railroad tour guide will move them through a network of safe houses using dead drops, secret symbols, and encrypted radio broadcasts. Eventually, the escaping synth will be taken to a physician where they will receive a memory purge and plastic surgery as part of their new identity. The leader of the operation is Desdemona, with Deacon leading guerrilla strikes against the Institute, the Brotherhood of Steel, or other enemies that obstruct the freedom of synths. Indeed, the New England Commonwealth, where the CIT was located, was just one of 13 regional commonwealths America's former 50 states were consolidated into in 1969. Of course, the Great War rendered these changes irrelevant, as it destroyed former borders and infrastructure. The current Wasteland has its own geography and key locations. Pittsburgh's industrial capacity made it a prime target for the nuclear assault, and thus had its steel mills reduced to molten rivers of toxic sludge. Now known as the Pit, it is a particularly miserable area inhabited by slavers, raiders, and mutants. At one time, an alliance of workers known as the Union tried to rebuild it into a safe industrial haven, but were outgunned by a sadistic raider army calling themselves the Fanatics. The combination of radiation and toxic pollution eventually transformed the residents with troglodyte degeneration contagion, reducing them to cannibalistic feral mutants called trogs. In the 2250s, the Brotherhood of Steel conducted the Scourge to exterminate raiders and mutants from the Pit, only to have a paladin named Ishmael Asher left behind after being wounded. Recovering, Asher managed to take over the local raiders and scavengers, as well as rebuild the munition plants, shaping them into his own army of slavers. Located in the Mojave Desert, the city of Las Vegas was known for its vice and bright lights before the Great War. Predicting the coming conflict, tech billionaire and CEO of Robco, Robert House, spent a fortune fortifying his casino, the Lucky 38, with a laser defense grid that intercepted most of the incoming missiles. It would be here that Mr. House would enter a stasis pod for the next 200 years, ruling New Vegas with the help of local tribes he had enlisted, as well as his own Securitron robots. Although the strip itself was preserved, the outer part of the city was damaged by the attack became known as Freeside, a slum home to gangs and the desperately poor. The families ruling the strip are the chairman, the suave occupants of the Tops Casino, the Omertas, remnants of New Vegas's mobster past that operate out of the Gomorrah Casino, and the White Glove Society, an aristocratic elite in the Ultra-Lux Casino that hide a dark secret of cannibalism. The preserved status of New Vegas, plus its proximity to the Hoover Dam, has made it a prime target for both the NCR and Kaiser's Legion as they seek to seize control of it from Mr. House. Once the seat of power in the United States, Washington was hit especially hard by China's attack. Now a maze of shattered rubble, much of it is irradiated and forces travelers to use dark subway tunnels infested with feral ghouls. Drinkable water is a precious commodity, with many surviving off preserved food from before the war, since agriculture is not possible. The Brotherhood of Steel occupies the ruins of the Pentagon referred to as the Citadel, where they wage a campaign against mutants plaguing the area. Aside from previously mentioned Megaton, A beached aircraft carrier known as Rivet City serves as a home to many, as well as the Republic of Dave, an isolated homestead to the northeast. A largely rural area, Zion Canyon in Utah was untouched by the nuclear apocalypse. It was here that the White Lakes tribe invaded under Kaiser's Legion, attacking the Soros and Dead Horse tribes. Joshua Graham had been immolated by Caesar after failing to achieve victory against the NCR in the First Battle of Hoover Dam. Having been thrown off the dam, he miraculously survived and returned to New Canaan, which Kaiser's Legion would also destroy. After taking refuge with the Dead Horse and Soros tribes in Zion Canyon, Joshua was a living legend, now known as the Burned Man, a deeply religious individual committed to protecting Zion and inflicting vengeance upon Kaiser's Legion. Needless to say, the post-apocalyptic Wasteland has no shortage of strange creatures. Both the ambient nuclear radiation and released FEV have changed many mundane animals into mutated radroaches, cazadors, and radscorpions, or even the two-headed Brahmin cattle. Others are truly terrifying, seeming to have been engineered to kill. Ghouls are among the most ubiquitous of the new creatures brought on by the apocalypse. While most humans perish upon being exposed to radiation, some have a genetic predisposition that prevents them from dying of organ failure and instead allows their body to use the radioactive energy as a source of regeneration. This process causes their hair to fall out and their skin to slough off, causing them to resemble walking corpses, but also makes them functionally immortal. Unsurprisingly, ghouls typically face discrimination from normal humans and often form their own communities, such as Underworld, built inside the Museum of History in the capital Wasteland. Over time, the same radiation that sustains a ghoul will destroy their brain's frontal lobe, causing them to become feral and hunt in packs as they attack anything with a heartbeat. After taking over the FEV program, the military moved research to the Mariposa military base in California. The bombs of the Great War caused the vats of FEV to rupture and leak into the atmosphere, causing many of the mutations seen in the Wasteland. Decades later, an explorer named Richard Gray would discover the facility and fall into one of the vats, from which he emerged as the Master, the first in an army of super mutants he would go on to create with the virus. In doing so, he hoped to merge humanity into a single mutated species in what he called the Unity. Standing over 7 feet tall, with dense musculature and green skin, they are immune to disease, aging, and radiation. The mutation caused by the FEV has the drawback of rendering them sterile and damaging their higher cognitive functions, however. A different variant of super mutants arose from Vault 87 on the East Coast that were even more aggressive and cannibalistic, eventually growing into massive behemoths once they aged. Marine life was not left unaffected by the cataclysm. Originating from crustaceans, mirelurks dwell near bodies of water and hives, taking an upright form largely encased in a tank-like chitin carapace with powerful pincers. Their egg nests are fiercely protected by amphibious mirelurk kings that have the ability to cloak themselves, as well as monstrous mirelurk queens that can spray acid. Chinese inmates of American internment camps named the Yao Gui, the Mandarin word for demon. American black bears were known to be skittish of humans in the pre-war world, but exposure to radiation has caused their fur to fall off their now leathery skin, their claws to become jagged talons, and their already powerful jaws to grow to the point where they can bite a human torso in half. Since they live in a state of perpetual agony and hunger from their condition, Yao Gui are highly aggressive and territorial. Of all the Wasteland's predators, it is the Deathclaw that stands as the apex. Originally, these monsters were genetically engineered by the military to be used for close-quarters combat in place of infantry. The DNA of the Jackson's chameleon was spliced with aggressive reptiles and mammals, with the resulting creatures later modified by the Master using the FEV. The hide of a Deathclaw can deflect small-caliber gunfire, and their claws are even powerful enough to tear through the power armor the Brotherhood of Steel wears. Not completely mindless attackers, they have been observed using pack tactics, taking cover, and dodging as they quickly close in on their prey. Aside from the biological threats of the nuclear wasteland, relics of the pre-war world still exist. Robots originally meant to serve humanity have had their programming corrupted after 200 years, leaving them to mindlessly perform tasks. From unassuming iBots to armored sentry bots that bristle with weapons, they are now driven by decaying code, viewing all living things as hostile trespassers. Designed for civilian use by Robco, Protectrons are among the most common models. Serving as mall security and beat cops, they move slowly and can fire low-yield lasers. Cheaply mass-produced, they are not designed for sustained combat, with some models meant for labor in factories coming equipped with nail guns or other tools. For domestic use, Mr. Handy and Miss Nanny appeared in many suburban areas. Hovering on a small jet engine, they had multiple arms fitted with a saw, flamethrower, and pincer that could be used for cooking, cleaning, or gardening. These same tools were put to a new sinister purpose against interlopers after the Great War, with a military model known as Mr. Gutsy outfitted with a plasma rifle and machine gun. Exclusively intended for military use was the Assaultron. With a slim, almost feminine design, the agile robot will charge at its target and slash with the hydraulic blades on its hands. Most devastating of all, their head can open to reveal a Cyclops laser capable of disintegrating its enemies into a pile of ash. Perhaps the most horrific of all robotic monstrosities, Robo-brains are a fusion of technology and organic components. Realizing a human brain could process tactical information faster than a rigid AI, government-backed corporations worked to implement the solution. Harvested from criminals and Chinese POWs, the brains were subjected to an electrochemical mind wipe to erase their memories, before being suspended in a biomed gel dome, which itself was mounted on a tread-based chassis. After 200 years of being trapped in an artificial body, these brains have gone insane and will open fire on interlopers with mesmetron beams, lasers, and Tesla rifles. Should their structural integrity fail, a Robo-Brain's nuclear reactor will melt down and kill anything nearby in a localized explosion. A mix of wholesome, retro-futuristic style combined with gruesome violence against a post-apocalyptic backdrop has earned Fallout its own special niche. Whether a prophesized chosen one hunting for a Garden of Eden creation kit, a fleeing vault dweller looking for their father, or a seemingly unlucky courier surviving a gunshot, exploring an America scarred by nuclear war is a real adventure. Although the protagonists, enemies, and years may change, war never changes.
Don't they know it's the end of the world?
Hi, I'm Gwen, and you're watching Excalibur Forge's channel for gaming,
Readings and more.
Remember to like, comment, and subscribe.
follow along on Twitch,
YouTube, Twitter.
And Facebook.